Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Hi.
Hey, Paul. Hi, Alyssa. Alyssa's back with another amazing marketing episode-ish, marketing and sales this time, which is really fun. Thanks for joining us again. Today, I wanted to kind of talk about creating content. I mean, we're obviously targeting it for sales. Obviously, some lessons will be applicable to other groups, but and kind of the insight that drove that for me was, in a world where creating email gets easier and easier, and the example I gave you all offline is like even HubSpot now has a tool, or their beta tool, that allows salespeople to just click a button, write the email for me directly in Gmail, don't have to go to their CRM or anything. The insight there is that then reaching out to people cold will get harder and harder as it gets easier and easier for people to do it. And so the insight there being that content on social, while it's been around forever, it seems like forever, is probably going to be one of the best ways going forward to cut through and really help drive inbound, or at least warm leads, not necessarily inbound in the traditional sense of it. Because I am not a great content producer, I'm really happy that Alyssa, you're here to help guide us through this, because I don't think I could share anything worthwhile. But there we go. Alyssa, thanks for having us.
Hi.
Thanks for being on the show again. I'll let you take it from here.
Thanks. Sure. Okay, well, I'll add to that by from a marketing perspective, and I think content creation, or what I call owned content, is probably the number one tool that B2B businesses can adopt and utilize, both from a marketing and a sales perspective. So, owned content is just basically creating stories, creating messaging, creating value that you're putting out there in the world to your prospects to help not only drive awareness, but most importantly, to convert a prospect. So, I see owned content mainly on social, which is those main platforms where we put owned content. Let's call it like TikTok, depending on your demographic, Instagram, perhaps, Facebook, I guess, if it's an older generation you're going after, and certainly LinkedIn from a B2B perspective. You're creating content that helps a prospect see you as something, someone, an organization that can serve them well. And so that's the real purpose of putting out content. And if marketers are doing a good job at putting out content and sales is aware of the messaging that they're putting out there, it helps to make the two groups really connected. And the whole purpose of it is to help make that sales call easier. So the more messaging and created content you can put out there that's of value, the easier your sales calls become, because you're converting a cold lead into a warm lead before your sales team even gets on the phone with them, ideally. And from a sales
Right.
perspective, you as a sales leader, let's assume you're not wearing both hats, which a lot of medium-sized businesses are, but let's say you have two distinct groups. As a sales leader, it's really important for you to also put content and value out there that's not just sales messaging, for people to trust you and see you as an expert and look to you as a guide when they're choosing a product or service. And ideally, they choose yours.
Yeah, and I mean, I've said it before, and I've said it on these podcasts, and I've said it offline. Like, I know for myself, anecdotally, that the more content I put out on LinkedIn, the more inbound or warm leads I get. And what's interesting is that there's that serendipitous effect, which is not necessarily the person like, oh, I saw your post, let's connect. It's like, oh, Frab, right, like somebody just spoke to me about them using HubSpot. Maybe they need to talk to maybe they need help, and they'll introduce me, and I'll just like, I get so many cold introductions or referrals, sorry, when I do that. So, and none of my messages are salesy, right? It's usually sharing this podcast or some a version of it. So definitely, I really, and that's probably one of the challenges that I do see when salespeople do post, is they tend to post like salesy content, like, hey, check out our demo page, like, hey, we're just launching a new product if you want to talk about that. Like, there's no, I mean, obviously that's not always the case, but a lot of what I see when they do post content, it is very
It's
salesy, right? Or
advertising.
they'll kind of,
It's advertising.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
they'll share like their company post about,
Yeah.
whatever.
Very hard shit for people to do that, Fab. I agree with you. A lot of people who post, salespeople, even sales managers, they're doing pure advertising and they're not focusing on true value content. I have a question for both of you. So what I've noticed when I speak to my clients is they totally agree, Alyssa. Like I'll tell them a version much less educated or much less knowledgeable with the actual marketing aspect of it, of what you're saying. I'm saying it's important to, it's important to share. It's important to create content. Obviously, you're the expert at doing that. But what I'm saying to them is just the basic concept of doing it. And it's really a question to both of you. And Fab, I'm sure you've seen this too, is that people are all saying, yeah, I'll do it, whatever. And then there seems to be this invisible block to being able or wanting or the fear of putting themselves out there. And I want to address that a little bit too in what we're saying today, because I think a lot of people agree to building content and whatnot, but a lot of people have that fear. And I know we've addressed it a little bit in the past, but can we take a few minutes to address that? Because I hear it so often, but what if my stuff's not interesting, or I'm worried? Like, how do you build up to that? Like, do you practice in your sandbox in the backyard? I remember Fab telling me about 3-4 years ago, Paul, just create a few videos and see how it goes. And I said, okay. And I did a few and I just put them out there and I was cringing and, I got some good response. So Fab was the one who got me to do it. He said, okay, just do it. Put yourself out there, say what you think. You're a smart guy. You've got things to say. So well, Fab, you helped me. So I've said what you did for me, but Alyssa, how do you get people to do that?
Yeah, I think it goes back to, this is hard for salespeople to get in their heads because they're not marketers. They're not always thinking in this way. But I think a good salesperson has to be client focused, right? They have to recognize it's about the other person and about what matters to them and about their knowledge base and their goals and their objectives and their problems that you're trying to solve with your product or service. And that's what good sales is. You taught me that, Paul, right? Like, find out what their pains are, find out what their goals are, and then in turn be able to offer the golden ticket on the other side. And so when you think about creating content, it's exactly the same. And if you know your ideal client really well, you know how to speak to them. And that's all that matters. Like, who cares about the other randos on LinkedIn? It doesn't matter. You're speaking to your big fish target client, your target
prospect. Did you
call them
randos?
Only person. Sorry?
Did you call them randos?
Well, yeah, like random people. Like you're not talking to like Susie who used to work with at Unilever. Like, she doesn't matter. Who cares? And that's often where people are judging themselves. They're worried about all the people they know thinking something of them, and they don't matter. What matters is your ideal target, the prospect you're going after. So if you know that you're speaking to them, and if you know you're offering value to them, there should be no concern about putting it out there. It's like doing a favor for someone. It's like bringing your neighbor's garbage. Like, you're welcome. I did this for you. So in putting out valuable messaging and insights as either a salesperson or a marketer to your prospect, you're doing them a favor. And so it's a lot easier to break down that barrier when you think of it that way. And that's what people want to buy from you too.
I'll just add something though, that, having lived it myself personally, there is some demoralizing factor when you do put out content and, nobody's commenting and nobody's liking, and fine, it happens once, you kind of get over it. It's like, it's like a salesperson and they're hitting a cold streak and everybody's just hanging up on them, right? Like, at some point it just gets demoralizing. And I think, but like here that we're talking about,
content sucks.
Well, that's it. But
I'm just kidding.
It happens. Right. No, but it's true. And then that's part of the lessons too, right? What's working, what's not working. I think as a sales team, I think you also should try to support each other and start, like when one of your sales team members shares content, comment on their content, like their content, and like do the same, and they'll do the same for you, because you all win at the end of the day, right? Like, as a company's content gets shared, it grows. But I mean, I'll say that's probably a big block that I encounter too, is like the crickets that people fear, right? It's not even being openly criticized. It's about being openly ignored.
But it's funny, Fab, that you say this, because you're the one who told me it's going to be good some weeks and it's going to be harder other weeks, because you're basically offering content. And of course, you're doing your best, but some weeks you're not a professional content creator, right? None of them are.
Right.
And that's what we like about LinkedIn, because we like the fact that it comes from the heart, from someone's expertise. So, really stupid example, but if you're a diesel mechanic that's trying to get, whatever business out there, LinkedIn's probably not your platform, but if you're talking about things that matter to people who need a diesel mechanic, you might not be, a Hollywood star, but if what you're saying makes sense, it's going to connect. And as you go and you do more things, you'll get better. But the curve on getting better is like, oh, dump, like it's a bit of it's a jagged curve. It's not always perfectly upwards. But Fab, I want to challenge you on one thing you said, and this is hard for me. So let's say someone creates a post and it's not that good, but you're going out to like it and stuff, whatnot. Like, should you not be helping them to create a better post and say, well, look, I suggest you do this and this next time, rather than just going and liking it and sharing? I don't know. What's your take on
Yeah. I don't know if it's an either or. I think it's maybe both, right? I think you need to support, because I think at the end of the day, yes, you can give advice, and that's always, constructive criticism should always be encouraged within organizations. But I think there's also a learning curve, right? People learn, like they learn with their medium. Maybe they have an easier time writing. They're more shy in front of a video, or they're really great at, they're a salesperson, but they're really good graphic designer on the side, and they really like creating graphics. And so it's also giving them the opportunity to learn what works for them and what works for their audience. So I would say it's both. I think you need to encourage your team, but I think, constructive criticism should be encouraged.
And I think maintaining the objective of the post is to impress and engage and convert a prospect. So if you are doing anything in terms of offering friendly advice, I would just DM someone too, and then put something of value in the comments that will help them further their sales objective.
Right.
That would be my reco. The other piece too, it might be hard for a salesperson or a sales leader or a business owner who's putting on their sales hat to think about, okay, what kind of value am I offering as a salesperson? And it's important to just do that same customer discovery work that a marketer does. So what's of value to that person? Why would they choose to buy from you or work with you or connect with you in general, right? So it could be a matter of just your general CRM process. It could be your reordering process. It could be, just think about anything from a operations perspective too, or an integrated internal operating system. What kind of processes you have in play that will help be a valuable positioning message for you to utilize as a salesperson, right? Like, hey, I try to make it super easy for my prospects to work with me or my clients to work with me because I do this, or I have a simple platform that allows them to do this. And, just be creative and think about your competition. Think about who that prospect is considering instead of you, and position yourself in a different, more valuable way for them to be an easy yes on a sales call. And the other piece of content too.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'll add one more piece of content just in terms of the purpose of writing. To your point, Paul, of, are you worried about the crickets? I have a lot of fish analogies. So in addition to your big fish, like, you're communicating to the muskie lurking under the dock, right? You don't know who's there. And yeah, there's bass floating around, but you're throwing in a muskie lure every time. And yeah, that muskie's not biting. It doesn't matter. Because if you meet someone at a golf game who's like, cool, I really liked you, I jived with you, and they creep you, and they find this bulk of amazing content on your LinkedIn profile, on your website, blog page, your sales-focused website blog page, pick your poison, they're converting, right? They're seeing that content, and it further is like, oh my gosh, I really need to get on that call with Fab, right? So that's the other purpose of having owned content somewhere. It's a dumping ground for proof that you're not useless at what you do, and that you're someone worth doing business with, that your muskie can find you later. So you're not trying to be a social media influencer. You're trying to put content out there. You're putting lures out there for the muskie under the dock.
Very well said. And so my first question to you, Alyssa, is, let's say, okay, so I don't know, let's choose any industry. I'm in transportation. So I'm a sales manager in the transportation industry, and I've got 4 or 5 salespeople reporting to me, and we're trying, we're trying to get some content out there. Other than thinking of your client and whatnot at a high level, what would be some tactical, just to talk about our title, what would be some tactical tips or tricks that you could give them to put them, some very tactical stuff to put them in the right gear to start doing it? Like, what would you say? Like, hey, number one, yes, think high level, put the lure out there, but what would you suggest they do? Like, would you give them a certain length of content to create? Would you say you should write first, video first? Like, what would you say to them? Okay, go for it. I'm Paul. I'm the sales manager in a transportation industry, and you're trying to get me to create my own content. I'm working with you. What would you say to me?
Yeah, I don't know. Well, I guess my first question is, to what degree are sales teams putting out own content? What's the objective behind it, right? Is it to take a lead and have then you be more likely to have a nice, enjoyable sales call? Is it to put messaging out there to drive more sales with your low-hanging fruit existing customers? So there's a million different objectives that a sales team can have with content.
Let's say it's a low-hanging fruit customers. Let's say, they know they connect. Let's say their whole network of salespeople have, 20,000 connections, and they just want to put some content out there for the low-hanging fruit that's sort of lurking in close to the lure.
Yeah. Well, the tactic should really be what fits best with your prospect. It goes back to the same question. So it's where's your prospect hanging out? Where will they see you and connect with you? Most likely it's probably LinkedIn. There's also email marketing. If you have a ton of prospects who you've done business with or had calls with, but were a not yet, you can work with your marketing team, or as a sales team, you could put together some inbound sales, like email messages or really valuable content that could go out to those prospects that were not yet, that keep them remembering about you. Like, this is also marketing content, but it's valuable to come from a sales team too, to some degree, because they have more nuanced understanding of maybe why you weren't chosen or maybe why you were not yet at that time. So I think it's really a matter of being strategic as a sales team, because you can't do all the things. You're not marketers, right? Your marketing team's already, that engine is rolling and going. It's what can you do within your sales space to collect that low-hanging fruit. And it depends on what it is, right? Maybe you all have a list of not yets from the last 6 months. Okay, are we going to put our heads together and figure out what we can offer these guys as something of value to make them think, oh, maybe I'll call them again. Or great, yeah, maybe I am ready to chat with Brian. So you have to kind of put your thinking hats on a little bit to figure that one out.
Okay. Yeah, and I think it's like, obviously different salespeople have, sometimes different audiences, different objectives, right? Like a few months ago, we talked about, sales development representatives whose goal is just to get meetings on the book. It's like they're going to try to probably share a different type of content. That's maybe an account manager whose role is to grow existing accounts and stuff like that. So I think, for example, somebody whose role is to grow an existing account might want to talk a bit more about the platform, like assuming you have a platform or your service or whatever, and more about how they work with clients, what other services they do, like what the benefits are. And, people that are looking out for new prospects or new opportunities will probably be more writing content that tackles the key pain points of your audience, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I think it also depends on the person's KPIs, right? Their goals at the organization. I think that that's probably also going to dictate a lot.
But I think what serves best is like offering something of value. It's to take off your sales hat and be like, what can I do that would just make this person's day, that would help them out a little bit, right? So when you give something, people give something in return. And that's where, I think good salespeople do this because they recognize there's an exchange of value. But I think it's really important to put your non-sales hat on and be like, what can I do? What's my goodwill gesture to these guys right now? And that would actually probably resonate better and best than an actual sales kind of message.
Yeah, for sure. Because like we said at the get-go, it's content, right? It's not like what Paul was saying. It's not advertising, right? Like there's advertising and there's content that you as a person are sharing are very different. I mean, at the end of the day, you could argue that their purpose is similar, but it's just completely different approach, right? Like nobody wants to see your posts about how great you are, right? They want to see about how you help people.
Fab, I'll go back to when you convinced me to do this podcast. 10 years ago. 3 years ago. Fab says to me, "Oh, Paul, let's do podcasts, and we'll help sales leaders on building the right things, right tools." And I said, "But Fab, we're just going to give out content. Like, isn't that going to hurt our businesses?" And Fab said, "No, if you put your content out there, they're going to want to come back to you and do more work with you." So what we do in this podcast is what you should be doing as a salesperson is at helping people out there to do a better job of what they do. Like today, we're trying to help sales leaders to help their salespeople or themselves to post better content to attract potential clients. And like you just so eloquently said, Alyssa, is that I'm going to put something of value out there to my client, regardless of whether they buy my product or not. You know, one of my posts a few weeks ago was about role plays, the importance of role plays. Well, in my work, when I'm dealing with clients, of course, I go into and I show them how to role play and I get very detailed and whatnot. So, but I did just a quick 2-minute thing on helping people on how to do role plays. And some people say, oh my God, you're giving your secret sauce. Yeah, but it's 2 minutes. They don't have the whole thing around them. And I'm helping them do something that's truly practical to them. And I got people from industries I never would have expected to say, wow, this is helpful to me. And I'm happy to put that content out there. And like you said, well, hopefully down the line, I'm hoping that someone at a golf tournament or at the golf course is going to figure out that I've got something, and I hope it's going to help my business. But I'm also just happy to put content out there that's going to help people to do their job better, or to help them in their business. And I think that's how you have to think if you're going to create content that people actually want to watch on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to make their life easier, you know, that's the whole purpose. And people choose you over and above price, even if you're a good person to do business with. Like, I'll go down the street to work with that vendor or that person because it's a better experience, and I don't care what it costs. So there's lots of different buying reasons too. So it's important for you to know why people choose you, why people choose your product or service, why people choose your company, why your clients choose you, so you know what to put out there for them. Mm-hmm. And the other piece about own content too is the more organic and natural you can be. There's a lot of hype out there right now about organic content and about content producing, and how the ways of like the social media agency are like dead basically, because it's no longer about advertising. It's about just being real. So even if you're a salesperson, be like, hey, I'm going on a sales call, and you show like what that experience is like be your own personality, because people are choosing you for you. Your product to some degree, but if there's a lot of competition, if there's a lot of you in the company, and someone says, I really just want to work with Bob, like they're choosing you for you. So be Bob, right? Like figure out what makes you win at sales and then put that out there more.
Yeah. I think, and what's nice about when you have a sales team is that, you know, we mentioned LinkedIn a lot because that's probably the most obvious choice at the beginning of the show. So you mentioned like the TikToks and all that stuff. And I mean, that's what's nice, because then when you bring in your personality, some people, the reality is business people are everywhere, right? Like we think LinkedIn because the parallels have been drawn, or the lines have been connected, or the dots have been connected, sorry. But the reality is like, you know, everybody's using TikTok, everybody's using Instagram, everybody, you know, whether you're a, you know, 13-year-old kid or a 57-year-old sales leader, right? You're using those platforms. And what I found interesting is, obviously I'm knee deep in the HubSpot environment, like you have sales engineers that are crushing it on TikTok and like so much engagement because HubSpot users are using TikTok, right? And so that's where the personality component comes in really handy, because LinkedIn is the easy solution, but there's YouTube Shorts, there's Instagram, there's Facebook, there's a whole bunch of different platforms that you can then branch out into.
Yeah, and you can integrate content into your HubSpot, any CRM platform. You don't even have to worry about external things like LinkedIn even, or TikTok necessarily, or anything that the marketing team is doing separately. Even within your CRM platform of just return emails, follow-ups after orders, whatever that chain or sequence might be within your customer journey, you make little nuggets of value within that. And that will help to, again, increase sales, increase, people upselling opportunities and return clients.
Yeah. And so I know we talked about like kind of the psychological barriers, right? Like I'm afraid of the crickets, afraid of the criticism. But the things that I see too is the reality, right? When you're in sales and you're looking at your sales dashboard, you're being measured on how many calls you're making, how many demos you're having, how many emails you're sending, how many deals you're creating, how many deals you're closing. None of them are content related, right? So at the end of the day, I'm always going to deprioritize what I'm not being measured against, right? So I would argue that sales leaders need to start thinking about adding content creation as a variable along the same lines that they value activity, sales activity out there, because that's definitely a way to help the sales team create content. Is if they know that they need to post, once a week, whatever metric makes sense for you, um, then and they're going to be held accountable to that, then that forces, that encourages content creation as well within the sales teams. I don't
Yeah.
know. What do you think?
And ideally, the content creation increases those numbers. I mean, that's the whole
Yeah,
point. If it doesn't
that's the whole
increase
point.
those numbers, don't do it. And so do a
Right.
little experiment. Be like, hey, let's do a month of us putting out content and see if that improves our conversion numbers in whatever metrics.
Yeah, I'd probably do a longer test than a month, but I would say let's do it. Let's run it for 6 to 8 months, right? And
Yeah,
see and compare and look at what's what, just to take into account seasonality and all that
and the
stuff
customer
as
life
well.
cycle, like it depends.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, totally. I would definitely put that in, and then the goal, if at the end of the day it's not moving the needle, then you need to look into what's going on.
I have
Any
another
thoughts on that?
question.
Yeah.
Is content creation for everyone on the sales team? Like, are there some people that might be really good at one-on-one sales, but they just don't have it for social media?
For a long, I mean, I'll hop in at a point of view, but Alyssa, I definitely want your feedback too. But not too long ago, I was said everybody can do it. I think some people, and I think to a certain degree that's true. Everybody has a potential, but yeah, some people have a harder time creating content. It's just going to be the reality, right? Like somebody who's already very active on social, and then they're just encouraging them to talk about work related stuff, for lack of a better word, like all the stuff we talked about, the pains and how you help and all that stuff will become easier to them. I think somebody who's not active might have a harder time. And that's when we talked about all the things that we talked about, like the KPIs, the support, the constructive criticism, like helps. Because I think at the end of the day, when somebody finds their way of communicating, whether that's sharing a podcast that they did, or whatever, they might not all be all like, some people like spend tons of time like putting together TikTok videos and they love it and they're having a lot of success with it. That's not the reality for everybody, but I think everybody can in time find their way of communicating.
Is there value to reposting content that you found putting together? Let's say you find a really good YouTube video on what it is you want to share and you share a couple of lines, or does that not have as much value? What do you guys think of that? Alyssa, what do you think?
Yeah. So there's a lot of different kinds of owned content you can create. I refer to that as curated content. So that's a great way. If you don't feel super comfortable as a salesperson putting yourself out there with your own thoughts or ideas, whatever, but you are an expert in your industry, you can still offer a lot of value to prospects and clients by the insights you're garnering from being a linchpin within that industry, right? Maybe you see lots of different types of companies that operate in the same way but aren't necessarily competitive, and you can offer insights amongst your clients as a result of that. So you have visibility that they don't. So if curated content is more comfortable for you, you're like a sponge, you're always researching, you're always looking up cool articles. Yeah, sharing that, but giving an assessment, giving a Cole's notes, giving an antidote to your perspective on whatever you're reposting of serves you very well in highlighting, again, your expertise, your passion about the industry, your personality. So there's tons of different ways to be creative about how you put yourself out there with content. And curated content is a great way to start. It could be even like tips and insights that you see. The other piece I was going to add as well, as a follow-up to further what Fab was saying, is, if a sales team isn't comfortable making content, if it's fully like, no, that's like marketing's job, we are not doing content, then I think you could look to the second way of making some synergy. Is if the marketing and sales team really work well together, then sales can sit down with marketing and really inform a lot of what marketing creates as owned content from all the amazing insights that the sales team is garnering from nonstop sales calls with prospects, people who choose them, people who don't choose them. So then marketing can in turn take those insights and that information and put it out there to make a warm, hot, knocking on the door lead to pass on to their sales team. for an easy conversion. So that's another way to increase those rates, would be for the sales team to work really closely with the marketing team, and they almost like co-create content a little bit together, or you're utilizing a lot of sales insights in your marketing content.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think like even going back to what you were asking Paul a couple seconds ago, which is like curating content, work with a marketing team to help you put together like a newsletter template that you can then send out to just your clients, right? And I think there are ways for them to tap, if that's how you do, because you read like 16 articles a day anyway on your industry, and you're just like work with a marketing team to put together a super simple template that you can like send off once a week to just your customers, like it's your little private newsletter within the company. I think there's a lot of great ways to work with marketing to help facilitate that for sales, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think too, big companies get precious about their branding. So sometimes, and I've seen it in big organizations like Fortune 500s, marketing gets really obnoxiously particular about what messaging can go out from the sales team. So it's not like perfectly branded and on brand and looking right. And I think as a medium-sized business, it's important for everyone to come together to recognize everyone has value, right? Like the sales team knows their clients, their customers at a nuanced level that marketing doesn't in any respect. So I think it's a matter of making objectives and strategy for the two separate content creation funnels, we can call them, and the team working together on it, because there is ways that sales can produce content that looks different than the awareness driving larger branded work that marketing is doing, that can still serve the company exceptionally well without marketing having to be all precious about their branded, beautiful rules and regulations, versus the sales team being like, no, I know my people. Like, I know that this will get them excited and buy this new product or buy more or upsell or, whatever it might be. So I think it's really important to be transparent and open to everyone's perspectives when it comes to own content.
Interesting.
Cool.
And I do have one more question.
Yeah.
One more. We were talking about ChatGPT earlier and how to use AI properly in your content creation. And we did say that things could get not fab, but could get fad and maybe redundant or boring. So what do you suggest? Let's say for someone who's starting to write content or a team that's starting to write content, how do you suggest that they use AI to their best advantage when they're creating content?
Let me go first, Sab?
Yeah, go for it.
I think it goes back to my usual preaching of you need to know your target really well. So you have a deep insight and understanding of how they like to be spoken to and what matters to them. And you've also done some really effective positioning work. I think as a salesperson, doing positioning work is really important too. It's of value to both sales and marketing. And once you have a good understanding of what matters to your prospect and how to communicate your service or product in a way that they will hear you, then you can go to an AI that will pump out sort of a generic template, or you could pump in extra specific and valuable messaging and insights that will in turn produce a more effective and pointed AI message or AI copywriting. So you have to do your human homework first before you rely on an AI to produce content for you. But the AI is a great way to like fast track that, especially if you're not a writer, you're a salesperson, but you know your target, you know your positioning, you know what the value is for your prospect. Those insights get pumped into the AI and you're more likely to get an effective message as a result.
So use it to refine, use it to create better content, but don't just expect it to do the whole thing from scratch kind of thing.
Not at all. Right. You have to have a human brain behind it. So whether you get something generic out and then you refine it using your human brain and insights, or you pump in the human brain insights into the AI and then you get a more refined answer out. You can do it one way or another.
Yeah. I mean, I would say my 2 cents in there is irrespective of content, I think as a salesperson, you need to get comfortable on how to use AI, right? Like just going back to the intro of the show, these tools are already all over the place, and they're just going to be more and more integrated within your CRMs and stuff like that. And if you don't know how to use these tools, you'll get left behind much faster than you were like if you weren't comfortable using a CRM. I think those tools are going to be omnipresent a lot faster than they already are. So I would just get comfortable using AI, period. And then, yeah, definitely using it for content creation. I think those are great insights for sure.
Yeah, because that's where if you're more traditional sales, you're like, I don't want to create something from AI because I like to write it myself, or I want it to sound like me, or I want it to be nuanced. And that's where to your point, Fab, you need to get friendly with the tech because it saves time and energy, but you still need to put a human, understanding on it. And it will serve you well in the end because you can still have an old school sales mentality, but still use AI as almost like leapfrogging, right?
Yeah.
An opportunity to get things done faster, better, more efficiently.
Yeah, because I mean, I know I'm stepping away a bit from the content side, but I mean, I think I think content creation is probably a great way to learn how to use the tools because I mean, think of if you are here as a salesperson not comfortable with the tool and your colleague is, and the colleagues like just can type into a prompt like, help me identify the deals that have the most chance of closing within the next 2 weeks. And you're still like going kind of the more old school way of just going through all your deals one at a time.
Oh, I see.
You know
So
what I
using
mean?
it as a tool for you as a salesperson too.
Yeah.
I
And
was
so
thinking more of outbound.
yeah, about both, right? Like
Yeah.
I think that's where I think you need to use the tools, and I think content creation is probably a great way because you do know your own tone. You are aware of what you do because some of the challenges with AI is right now is that it's not always true what it puts out there. So the fact that you know your industry and all that, I think is a great way to learn how to refine and use and adapt, so that you can then use it as a tool internally.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, efficiently using a CRM is huge, and making sure that you're comfortable with it, because it's like going from a Rolodex to something on your phone, right? We're moving into that transition here, really.
Yeah. All
That's
right.
true.
You want let's wrap this up. It's been almost 40 minutes of awesome content. I have a few takeaways, but does anybody want to share their points
You
before I
start,
go?
Fab.
Yes, I've been taking notes diligently. In no particular order, I would say I think one thing that you said, Alyssa, at the top of the show that I really liked was that I think as a sales manager, you need to start putting content out there. I think a lot of reps will answer to what their leadership's teams do, and if you're preaching but not practicing, I think that'll make it harder for your team to get started. Obviously, not sales content, right? Just real, actual value content. I like that what you mentioned also about the identifying kind of the who, the what, the why. Like, what are you trying to, spending a bit of foundational time in what we're trying to do, and maybe tying it also with a rep's objectives, right? If a rep's more account growth, like how can we showcase the value of our product as opposed to maybe whatever. And then training your team. I think we didn't mention training a lot, but I kind of saw it kind of in between the lines is like train your team on how to create content and how to help them find their medium, whether it's creating videos or curating other people's content and stuff like that. Also teaching them about how to be patient, right? Because we do know that content marketing is not an instant thing. It's not like you're not going to post out one piece of content and get 16 leads out of it, right? Like it's not usually like that. I would teach the team on supporting each other, right? Like constructive criticism for sure, but supporting each other as well. Putting in KPIs and learning how to use AI. Those are my key takeaways.
Yeah, that pretty much sums everything up very well.
Awesome. I know one thing we didn't talk about, and maybe we'll slide it in somewhere else at some point, is just like tying it in also with a prospecting process and optimizing your LinkedIn profile and all that stuff, right? Like if you're posting content but you have like no picture, no nothing, that's obviously going to hinder your success.
Yeah, exactly. And I really think in light of doing all that and creating content, it is really worth doing the exercise of profiling your ideal target. And sales maybe does that to some degree, but I don't think they do it in the same way marketing does. And I think it would serve a sales team really well to do some real targeting work, because it will serve them in their sales calls, it will serve them in their content, it will serve them in proposals they're creating, pitches they're doing. And doing a bit of that target work will give them a lot of ideas and insight, and that content that somebody's a struggle to create out of thin air already in one place for them to pull from. And their marketing teams can help them with that too. But it's a very worthy endeavor. Will serve them well.
Very cool. Alyssa, thank you so much, as always.
Thanks, Alyssa.
Thanks, guys.
Take care, Paul. Bye.
Ciao, guys.